Okay, hello everybody. Thank you all for joining. We're going to start to kick things off while people still trickle in. For everyone who doesn't know, I'm Connor. I'm going to be your host for the wonderful Big Red Jelly holiday webinar event. I'm so stoked to see those of you who could join us, current clients, partners, everybody that's already on the call. Although I can't actually see your faces, I can still see who's in here, your reactions, and so on. We're going to go through a slide deck for about 15 to 20 minutes. That is going to be on marketing strategy, implementing and creating it. Then at the end, we're going to reserve some time for questions and answers. So quick Q&A session. There is a Q&A tool within Google Meets. If you click the 9 little dots at the bottom right, you're able to find the meeting tools, and you should see a Q&A. And you can post those anonymously. You can post them to everybody. You can post them not anonymously. And so keep that in mind for when we get there. I'll bring that back up at the end. Now, for those of you who don't know me, I've been at Big Red Jelly for 5 years now. I'm the Grow Director here at Big Red Jelly. I started initially as a website designer and builder here on our wonderful build team. And now I'm the director of our ongoing marketing services here at Big Red Jelly. That's what we call our Grow service. Now, as we start to jump into things, I know your guys' time is valuable. So my goal is to make this as practical and useful as possible. As we kind of go through each one of the slides, there will be some action items that I give you, or homework pieces that you can choose to take. You can also take screenshots of the slides. I'm sure that our team is also going to be sending out these slides in a follow-up email, and this is also being recorded. So if you ever want to recap on what we talked about, there will be plenty of resources coming your way. Now, the webinar is really meant to be a strategy alignment session more than anything else. The goal of today is clarity. Now, clarity around who you're actually marketing to, what success really looks like, and where your biggest marketing opportunities are right now. So if you leave today with a few things that you can work on immediately inside your business, then this will have been a good use of your time. Now, before we jump in, I want to give a quick introduction to the team here at Big Red Jelly. I gave an introduction to myself, but the team here at Big Red Jelly and the people behind the work. Now, Big Red Jelly, we are a branding, web design, and marketing growth agency. Now, our core philosophy is pretty simple. It's brand, build, grow. It's also our tagline. And it perfectly describes our services and how we help businesses. So we start by helping businesses get clear on who they are and how they're positioned. Then we build digital experiences, websites that support that brand that we defined with our brand team. And finally, through our ongoing marketing or our grow team, we focus on marketing strategies that actually drive business outcomes and not just trends or activities. Now, again, I'm part of the grow team. I'm the director of the grow team. And we work closely with our clients after their website or brand has gone live. Now, our role is to help translate business goals into practical marketing strategies, prioritizing what matters most, and hopefully executing in a way that's sustainable and measurable. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about, how Big Red Jelly's experience supports this. I have a few book recommendations as we go through. And it really does a great job of reflecting how we think internally on how we approach these very same strategies with our clients. Now, again, this isn't a theory. It's a framework that we use to guide real decisions, budgets, priorities, so on and so forth. And somebody said, please do recommend some books on the topic. I will. There is one good book recommendation in here. But to start, let's start with, why most marketing fails. Now, most marketing doesn't fail because of something like Google ads don't work, or SEO doesn't work, or social media doesn't work. It usually fails because people jump straight into tactics before answering a few foundational questions. Now, I see this all the time. Business comes to us and they say, hey, we need more leads. So they start running ads, or, they're not clear on who they actually want and what they're optimizing for, or they're not sure what success should look like or how it's measured. Now, when that happens, marketing can feel expensive, frustrating, unpredictable. So before we even start to talk about any channels or tactics, we have to start with the foundation. If this part isn't clear, everything else becomes a lot harder and more expensive. So what I want to start with is starting with the audience. Now, I love this quote. Everyone is not a target audience. And really what we're trying to do here is define and discover who our target audience is. But it's my favorite quote. Everyone equals no one. If your message really is for everyone, it usually doesn't resonate with anyone. Now, good marketing is just as much about exclusion as it is inclusion, right? Exclusion as it is inclusion. When you try to speak to too many people at once, your message can get watered down and your marketing becomes way less effective. Now, the first book recommendation that I have for you guys it's a book called The One Page Marketing Plan. And I believe it's by, I think his name is Allan Dib or Alex Dib. I think it's Allan Dib. Somebody may correct me. But if you haven't read it, I highly, highly recommend it. It talks about how you can build your marketing plan and marketing strategy, and the title, One Page Marketing Plan, and literally you can build it all in one page. Now, if you have read the book, for those of you, I think somebody threw up some emojis there, but if you have read the book, the author talks about finding a starving crowd and people who already know they have a problem that are actively looking for a solution. So in the book, he uses the example of the starving crowd. They're looking for food. They're actively looking for that solution. Now, marketing works best when you're stepping into an existing conversation like that example he uses, not just trying to convince everyone that they should care. Now, once we accept that, we can't market to everyone. The next thing that usually causes confusion is how we define who we are marketing to. I saw a question pop up that talked about, it just popped up briefly, but about buyer personas. And that's exactly what we want to dive a little bit deeper into. So your target audience versus your buyer's persona. Now, these two terms I hear get mixed up all the time. So this is the way that I like to simplify them. Your target audience is who you serve. Your buyer persona is why they buy. Now, the way I like to think about this is, two different businesses can serve the same audience on paper, but they may need completely different messaging. For example, say we have two contractors who might be both serving homeowners, but one of them targets or services emergency repairs, and the other targets maybe something like high-end remodels. Definitely the same audience, but totally different problems, different motivations, and different buying triggers for sure. Now, this is where psychographics are going to definitely matter more than demographics. It's less about their age or income and more about their mindset, the urgency, and ultimately the problem that they're trying to solve. But instead of just keeping this, super high level, I want to ground this in a few practical questions that you guys can ask yourselves right now. So get ready to take a screenshot, write these down. But I have 5 questions that I hope brings a lot of clarity to this. Now, we start with who gets the most value from what you offer? Who's the easiest to close? Who is the most profitable long term? So who's going to give us the best lifetime client value, or lifetime value? Who refers people like them? And lastly, who do you not want more of, right? Who do you not want more of? Now, I like that last question a lot because most businesses can answer the first view, but the last question is really important and quite often overlooked. If you consistently attract price shoppers, high maintenance clients, your marketing will always feel like a grind. It will always feel hard. Now, being clear on who you don't want can help shape your messaging, your positioning, just as much as knowing who you do want. Now, if you remember one thing from this topic, this exercise alone can start the improvement of your marketing. If you had to describe your ideal customer in one sentence, could you? Like that's the real question. Could you describe your ideal customer in one sentence? Whether it's writing these down, one specific customer type, one core problem, and then one desired outcome. Who is that person? Now, as you guys think about this, it may be hard to think of that. Be like, okay, well, it could be a lot of different things, and that's normal for this to be hard. That usually means that the work of defining this is worth doing. It's funny because here at Big Red Jelly, we actually do this very often. So our CEO Josh Weber, he'll use the example. I think he's maybe on this call, but he'll use this example of how he takes himself through the buyer's journey. Yep, there he is. He'll take himself through this buyer's journey, or our buyer's journey, from start to finish. He'll create an email, start as a lead, and go all the way through our process as this anonymous secret person to try and see where the gaps are. And that's really what you're doing here is, you're starting with a clear goal. It's strategy based, not just activity. Now, to continue forward, let's expand this into marketing goals versus business goals. Now that we have a better picture of who we're trying to target, marketing doesn't just exist. Marketing exists to support the business, not the other way around. Traffic, followers, impressions, those aren't goals. Those are, inputs, better described. And if we can't clearly tie marketing back to a business outcome, it becomes really hard to evaluate whether it's working or not. So at Big Red Jelly, especially on the Grow team, we start with the business objective first, and then we reverse engineer the marketing strategy around those goals. For those of you who may have worked with Big Red Jelly or our clients, I believe I saw some of you in there. That's what you see in our client roadmaps or our Grow roadmaps. Now, as we start to cover this topic, I'm doing this because I have a monitor that I'm looking at the slides with. A lot of businesses will say things like, we want more leads, but that's usually a symptom of a bigger goal. So what I want to do is I want to zoom out a little bit, and I want to say, okay, there's a lot of business goals that we could be talking about, and I want to focus on three. So there are really three main types of business goals that marketing supports. First one being revenue growth, operational efficiency, and then brand positioning or market authority. Now, most small to medium-sized businesses, even some enterprise-sized businesses, almost entirely focus on revenue, which makes sense, but strong marketing improves efficiency and the brand at the same time. So better positioning leads to better leads. Better leads usually leads to easier sales. So here's where this starts to become practical. Different goals require different marketing approaches. If cash flow is tight, you probably need demand capture. That might be search, that might be retargeting, or improving conversion paths. When I mention retargeting, this could be an existing business, something that is a lot of the times overlooked as well as past clients, people that we already have been in touch with, people that we are already on a first name basis with. If you're playing the long game, brand, content, and trust building matter a lot more. Now, this is why, always copying somebody else's marketing strategy could be dangerous. Their goals, timelines, constraints might and probably are, way different from yours. Now, the hardest part of goal setting, and as we look at this, isn't knowing what you want. It's choosing on what to focus on right now. And so I put this at the bottom of the slide: 90-day windows. What are we trying to increase by how much, by when? Now, at Big Red Jelly, within our grow team, I have it distilled into our team to focus on a 90-day window. I'm a big believer in shorter goal windows, because if we think about a 90-day goal window, 90 days forces focus. You can focus on maybe one primary overarching goal, not 5. And really what I want you to ask yourself is, if I had to pick one thing marketing should improve in the next 90 days, what would it be? Once you know who you're marketing to and what you're trying to achieve, the final piece is figuring out where your best opportunities are. And so, at this point, we've talked about who we're targeting. We're talking about business goals tying into marketing focuses. But now, what are those actual opportunities? That's the final piece of the puzzle. And this is where people default to tactics, super quickly. It's almost the first thing that I see a lot of people jump to. So what I do want to talk about is, and what I mean when I say marketing opportunities, is I don't mean platforms or trends. I mean gaps. And I mean gaps specifically in awareness, understanding, trust, or action. Now, if people don't know you exist, that's an awareness gap. If they know you exist but don't understand what makes you different, that's a consideration gap. If they understand and trust you but don't take action, that's a conversion gap. You're getting the traffic to your website, but they're not converting, as a real example. Then you have a conversion problem. Now, most of those gaps fall into those 3 areas. And so, this lines up closely, again, kind of a reference to that one-page marketing plan book. Again, I highly recommend it for any small to medium-sized business owner, somebody who wants to improve their marketing or marketing skills. But this lines up pretty closely with something he mentions in that book, Allan or Alex Dibb, whichever one we decided to land on earlier. He talks about the before, during, and after framework. And you may hear that before, during, and after framework in a lot of marketing talks or any TED Talks that you've seen about marketing. But most businesses will jump straight to conversions. But if awareness or trust is missing, conversions becomes expensive. Rather than guessing where to focus, we can audit this pretty simply by asking specifically these questions that I have on this slide. Do people know we exist? Do they understand our differentiators? What sets us apart from the competition? And is it easy to take the next step? Is it clear what the next step is, or what I'm going to get by interacting with your brand? There we go. The one-page marketing plan by Allan Dibb. I was close. I think I said Allan. I may have threw an Alex in there. Somebody threw that in the Q&A. But honestly, looking at this, marketing strategy is often just being honest about where things are breaking down in your process. As I talk about process, for those of you on this webinar who may have came from our small business success series in Provo, we talked a lot about processes last time, and really that's what we're building here. We're building marketing processes, doing gap analysis, seeing where the gaps are and fixing it. So if you haven't been to one of those small business success series, I highly recommend. We always have some awesome speakers from different local companies and so on. But now, when us at Big Red Jelly, we work on this with small to medium-sized businesses, these are oftentimes the most common opportunities we see. And again, to get more practical with these, I've divvied them up into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 takeaways right now. Website clarity and messaging, search visibility, retargeting already warm traffic. And I'm not just talking about somebody who has seen your social media post once, but oftentimes some of those things that are overlooked that I outlined earlier. Search visibility, oh, I said that one. Email follow-up and nurturing, reviews, and referrals. Now, one thing I noticed when looking at this is like, that is a very unexciting list. It truly is. It's not the sexy, social media ads or, like programmatic ads or something that you would immediately see, when you're like, oh, I need to ramp up my marketing strategy. But honestly, like most growth comes from identifying gaps and fixing the fundamentals, not always chasing the bright and shiny new platform. And along those same lines, if you've ever heard us talk at Big Red Jelly, it's being consistent with your brand as you do that, right? How are the changes you're making on brand and consistent with your brand? So it isn't doing everything. It's choosing the right thing to start with, and that should kickstart the marketing momentum. Now, I do have a prioritization exercise on this slide, where I want everybody to write down an opportunity in each bucket. So an awareness opportunity, a consideration opportunity, and a conversion opportunity. And then in looking at those, I want you to ask yourself, which one moves the needle the fastest with the least complexity? Now, that's usually, again, where the momentum starts. And so, looking at this, we've covered a few different I wanted to go back really quickly to these exercises, but we have an exercise for each stage here. And again, we'll share this over. I'm sure we'll send in a follow-up email with these slides. This is also being recorded so that you can refer back to it, but I highly recommend taking your business through that practice. Now, if there's one theme across everything that we talked about today, it's that good marketing starts with clarity, not complexity. So clarity beats complexity, focus beats volume, consistency will always beat intensity. Now, good marketing often looks boring on the surface, but boring done well can really compound over time. Now, this isn't necessarily saying that you need to overhaul everything. Really, if I could say like 3 takeaways from those exercises that we talked about today, this will help you with every marketing decision and make it easier with every marketing decision. Clarifying your audience in one sentence, define one 90-day business goal, and identifying your biggest marketing gap. So that is everything that I had to cover today. Now we're going to reserve time for Q&A. I'm going to jump back to the Google Meets. I'll leave this screen up. If anybody has any questions, there's going to be other people that are probably thinking the same thing. So feel free to start shooting them away. We'll hang out here for about 5-10 minutes or until questions stop coming in. And then again, I highly recommend anybody to check out the other events that Big Red Jelly does and the free resources that we have on our website. We have a lot of awesome downloadables. We have like a 1-page marketing plan downloadable, a lot of cool downloadables that you can start to use, similar to some of the exercises that I showed. And then I know I mentioned this, but we do a lot of these talks. Start sending in questions, by the way, if you have any. We do a lot of these talks, whether it's webinar or in person. We do a small business success series in Provo, Utah, for those of you who aren't in Utah. And we do have, other business owners, partners, people come and join, and they're talking about different topics. And it's really insightful. Sometimes it's on stuff like finances, and sometimes it's on processes. So I invite you to check those out as well. Information can be found on our LinkedIn or through our website in the events under our resources. But we'll hang out here. I wish I had some cool Christmas music. that I could play in the background. But I mentioned, we had one question come in. You mentioned conversion rate, getting traffic but not converting. What are some tips for fixing that? Ooh, yeah, this is a good one. Because sometimes when we look at a conversion rate, there's a million different things that I could say to this. One thing that we do like to do is we like to zoom out and look at the whole entire buyer's journey and say, hey, what have those people seen up to this point? What has gotten them to the point of the page maybe that we're trying to get them to convert on? Are we aligned in our messaging? Are we aligned in our content? But then some more practical ones, reviewing the analytics of the page. Is the call to action hard to find? Is the form on the page way too long? Is the form found in an easy place? One example that I actually like to use, so what I'm talking about here is your web design best practices. If you can make sure your messaging is aligned and you have been gearing content towards that user to convert, whether it be through a social media post or whether it be through an advertisement, then you want to look at web design best practices. And that's kind of the overarching theme right there. We use heat maps and user recordings when we are learning or continuing to learn on web design best practices to see what users are actually doing on different websites per industry. And something unique that we found a lot of the times is attention spans are getting shorter and shorter. And so how clear and concise is your call to action? How well do you outline next steps? How well do you differentiate from the competition? And how in line with that is the original messaging of what got them to that point? Next question we have is, after I know who the target person is, how do I start deciding on what things I do for marketing? Yeah, so once you decide, who the target person is, then how do you decide on what things you should do for marketing? Well, a couple of questions that you can ask to define a persona further is, what are their pain points? Where are they hanging out? Where are they looking for the solution to their problem? That can usually help with the initial start of like, hey, what are the different routes or channels that I could use? There are some awesome tools out there that can help you with this. One thing I like to say is don't overlook something like, Gemini or ChatGPT, not necessarily saying it should be your number one source of truth, but, where are, people similar to that hanging out? There's also tools like SparkToro, any type of analytic tools, SEMrush, Ahrefs, and so on. But defining your target audience enough to the point where you understand where they're at, you understand where they're hanging out, where they're finding the solution to their problems. This question says, what does the client onboarding process look like for BRJ? And is there anything specific you do in that process that helps set clear expectations for the client? Oh, yeah, this is a really good question. So it depends on this. Well, for all of our services here at Big Red Jelly, we start with 3 steps. We start with discovery, research, and strategy. So whether you're working with our brand team, our build team, or our growth team, we start with those. And prior to that, there is a sales process that you go through that kind of helps set expectations a little bit. But the goal of our discovery call is to learn about your business, to show you how we operate, and then to do subjective research on your industry, your market, your business, and then combine your goals with that research and say, okay, hey, here's the plan on how we're going to move forward or how we're going to make this partnership effective. And so, Alec, that was a great question. Very brave. You're the only person who hasn't asked anonymously. Shout out you. If it's just me, how do I do the gap analysis thing you mentioned your CEO does? Ooh, this is a really, really great question. So again, for this one, this is a really important one. If it's just me, how do I do the gap analysis thing you mentioned that that our CEO Josh Weber does. And there's a couple ways of doing this. First, have you had a client in the past? Talk to that client, right? Ask that client. Sit down with that client. Say, hey, what made you choose me? What was the first thing you saw? Where did you go? What made you go with my product or service over the competitors? Right? There's also some modern ways of doing that. I've seen a lot of business owners do that. I see a lot of like sales consultants do something similar to that. I've seen a lot of marketing strategists do that to find out to help market a brand better. That's a very traditional way of doing it. There's modern ways of doing that, right? Surveys is a great one. Just sending them an email and asking them, right? If they've been in a nurture campaign for a while, send them a quick, hey, why are you still in my nurture campaign? Why are you still choosing to get emails from my brand? What do you like about my brand that speaks to you or the problem that you have, and how are we helping you solve it? So that's what I would recommend if it's just you. That's actually kind of where we started that process. But now our CEO is out of the days of where he does a lot of the work, and so he comes in and does it himself, which is cool. Oh, this is a good one. One more question that came in. What is a nurture campaign? Ooh, this is really good. So a nurture campaign, it does just that. It nurtures clients, prospective clients, ideal clients for when they are ready to purchase, or even after they've purchased, when they're ready to become an advocate for your brand. And so, to get real practical, what this is, you may have somebody who is at a different stage of the buyer's journey than somebody else. And when we talk about the buyer's journey, what I'm talking about is navigational traffic, informational traffic, or transactional traffic. So an example of that I like to use to define that further is, does somebody know your brand already by name? If I look up Nike shoes, am I looking for another type of shoes? No, I'm looking for Nike shoes. That's more navigational traffic. If I'm in the informational stage, I may be asking, are Nike shoes or Adidas shoes better, right? I'm looking for either one of those. And then more transactional is like, hey, yeah, I am direct. I am ready to purchase. I'm now in the phases where I'm searching up search terms more related to how this product is going to help my problem, this product or service. And so when we look at that, it isn't always the case that somebody may stumble upon a piece of content that you have where they're at a different stage in that buyer's journey. And so what a nurture campaign can really help with is how we can nurture them so our brand stays top of mind when they're ready to purchase. And, again, I mentioned at the beginning of that part where even after they've purchased is, what do they do with your brand now that they've already purchased a product or service? How do they become an advocate for your brand? How do you nurture them to leave you a review? How do you nurture them to refer friends? How do you stay top of mind so when a friend asks them a question, they say, oh, you should work with Big Red Jelly because they're awesome, and I get their emails, right? Okay, another question from Alec. How in-depth do you go in the discovery meetings in terms of the client's businesses, audience demographics, brand guidelines, etc.? And what do you do if your client doesn't have answers to your questions in the discovery meeting? It's a solid question. To answer the first part, we go pretty in-depth during the discovery meeting. Our strategists, depending on the team that you're interacting with, they're to the point where they almost have like every question memorized for any type of scenario that they may run into. And the goal by asking some of the questions that we ask is to get the necessary information from you. So even if you don't know the answer all the times, we can help you identify what the answer is. And that's kind of where the research comes in, is that helps us with that gap of like, okay, business owner is, the business is here now. They want to be here. What else are we missing in the middle? Another question just came in. If I think I can help two specific audiences, would you do two separate marketing campaigns and an overall company marketing, or how should I position that? Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, I mean, as we talk about marketing campaigns overall, or a branded campaign, that can mean a lot of different things. But one thing that I want to be very clear of is that the core brand behind the marketing campaign needs to be consistent, 80% of the time or more, right? And so you want clients that align with your brand, whereas the marketing campaign or the branded campaign can help, position or fill that gap of, different audiences. Brands can definitely have more than two different audiences, and there may be different ways to approach it. As an example, one business may want to be they want to be a thought leader to local teachers around, but they want to sell something to students, right? And so the kind of content they're creating, where they're placing that content, what the calls to actions are, will be a little bit different to each one of those audiences, and that's totally fine. My favorite branded campaign, excuse me, my favorite branded campaign is the Nike Just Do It campaign, where that did start out as a branded campaign, but it continues to go on as their tagline and everything that they do, right? But all the time, do you see things that speak to different audiences from Nike? Yes, but the core of who their brand is stays the same 80% of the time or more. Okay. We'll hang out for a couple more questions as they filter in. We're going to stop the call at 5:45, so I'll hang out for about 6 more minutes. But I appreciate you all for joining and your wonderful questions that you've had so far. I believe I can actually mark. Oh, this is a good question. So another question just came in. How would we target someone as specific as teachers, as you said? Like if I wanted to target specific groups, and can I get in trouble for any targeting? That's a good question. Well, as we talk about targeting, I want to make sure that we're clear on, your gearing content and positioning your brand in the places where they would find their solution. So, speaking of that, as yes, you can target somebody as specific as teachers. And how would we do that? It all comes down to, it's going to be kind of a high level answer because I'm not sure exactly what you do. I'd actually love to understand a little bit more about what you do. So if you wanted to email me after this, I could continue on this. But where is going to be the best channel to target teachers, and what is going to be the best message that aligns with your brand and products? So as an example, would I say, hey, if you want to target teachers, I probably wouldn't target them on, okay, this may be a shot in there, something like Snapchat, right? Where it's like, hey, are teachers going to be hanging out on Snapchat all the time? Is that where they're going to want to see your content? No, it's probably better suited for something like LinkedIn or maybe a teacher's conference, right? We can talk in-person marketing versus digital marketing. But in just understanding, where they hang out and where your solution comes in, where they're looking for a solution. Ooh, yeah. So any other recommended books, podcasts, newsletters, etc.? Yeah, there are a couple actually. I'm going to stop sharing my screen because I saw one today come in through. There was a one somebody shared with me today. It's called Good Ads Matter on LinkedIn. It's a page, and apparently they're posting some amazing stuff that's being done. I am part of a couple different newsletters. I also really like to follow. I also really like to follow thought leaders in MySpace. So not on MySpace, for those of you who remember MySpace, but in like my industry. So, for marketing and advertising, there's a lot of really awesome branders. There's one that wrote a book called Logos That Last. Allan Peters is a really great thought leader in the space. There's also this one's it's on the tip of my tongue. There's also another brander that I really like. What's his name? Oh, James. Oh, what's his name? James. Can't remember his name off the top of my head. If I find it, we'll include it in the email that goes out. But also one thing that I like to follow is like, brands that I think have really awesome marketing and being like, hey, I want to go through their process, right? I talk about this all the time with my team, but like, I really enjoy Nike, their clothing, but I also really enjoy the way that they market online and they market, through the different steps in their process, their retargeting ads, their emails, so on and so forth. This question was, should I do in-person and digital marketing or just focus on one or the other? This is a really great question. I mentioned earlier like a conference, right? And I count that as a marketing effort. Really, when I'm looking at marketing, I'm looking at, brand management, the actual like advertising side of marketing and your online digital channels, and then also that sales enablement side. And so, yeah, I would always suggest like, hey, if there's something where your product or service perfectly fits into, an event that's going on, see if you can be a vendor at the event, right? So that's the more in-person side of it. I think they kind of go hand in hand. So when you're building a marketing strategy, you can kind of map out like, one example that I use is I was working with a pest control company a couple years ago. And one day I was talking to them and I was saying, hey, we've kind of built out the digital side of your marketing, but what happens with the rest of your client journey? What happens as it starts to meld into your sales process? It's like, oh, well, once they become a lead and we've qualified them as a lead just over the phone, we go out and we talk to them. And, I asked them, I said, okay, who goes out there and talks to the still prospective client? They haven't paid anything yet. We're still kind of in the lead nurturing phase before they become a client. And he said, oh yeah, it's my dad. And, I was like, okay, awesome. What does he do when he gets there? And he's like, well, he goes out there, he talks to him, he kind of inspects the house. I'm like, what does he give them? Does he give them anything? What's his conversion rate on when he goes to these houses? And he's like, oh, usually, actually, I don't know what he gives them, honestly. He's like, I think he might give him a pamphlet. I think he might give him, a business card. And after finding out, he gives them a business card and there's nothing else that happens with that. And so one thing that we talked about is, hey, there should be a leave behind that happens. This is still a marketing prospect. They are a lead at this point, but they have not paid you yet. And we actually found out his conversion rate was 1 out of every about 15 clients that he went and talked to would actually become a client. And so what we did is we said, okay, well, let's give him a pamphlet. Let's put a QR code on that pamphlet and let's build a landing page so that, hey, yeah, maybe this person isn't ready to purchase just yet, but on that QR code, we can have an offer on that landing page for $20 off their first service, or, refer a friend and your first service is free, something similar to that. Of course, it needs to make sense for, the business. But we saw his conversion rate in giving them a pamphlet that was on brand, spoke about their UVPs and what their differentiators are, that his conversion rate of going to talk to these people and qualifying them went from 1 out of every 15 to 12 out of every 15, which was super awesome. So I think a good rule of thumb when you talk about in-person or digital marketing is, what is every touch point that I have with my ideal client from start to finish before they even become a customer? And it would be pretty eye-opening on what you might find, where some opportunities are. Okay. I haven't seen any other questions come in. If you do, oh, Alec had one more question. He may be asking it shortly. So we'll hang out for a minute. After that, I'll do one more question. And then after that question, I am going to throw my email into the chat. And if any other questions come up, please feel free to reach out to me. Also, if you just want to chat, if you want to hop on a call and just chat about your business or your marketing gaps or opportunities, I'm more than happy to. I'll give you a free assessment. It's not a sales pitch. I'm happy to talk to you about your business. Oh, Alec did not mean to hit the react button. No further questions. So thank you all for everybody who has joined. It looks like people have started to trickle out as we're in questions time. There's my email in the chat. If you guys can't see it, my email is Connor, CONNOR @bigredjelly.com. Feel free to reach out to me at any time. I'll get back to you. Happy to hop on a call. Okay. Thank you guys so much for joining, and look out for other Big Red Jelly events. Thanks, guys. Bye.